Today, I want to talk about the top 4 mistakes that I see people making all the time in the short-term rental business. I've been in this game for almost 10 years. I've made a ton of mistakes myself. I've learned from them, thankfully, but I'm hoping that this video saves you a lot of money and a lot of heartache. I'll just jump right into it. The first mistake I see people making is they pick the wrong market. I cannot stress this enough. If you're going into a market that you either don't know or this is your first Airbnb or VRBO you're going to launch, you really need to know your numbers. It's a little easier when you're buying a second or third property in an existing market because you're already going to know the revenue and occupancy that you have and probably where to be within the market itself, right? But you want to study the markets, understand what's the revenue potential for a particular property, what's the saturation, how much competition do you have in that market as far as like population growth and how many seasonal visitors they have throughout the year. These are the kind of parameters you want to look at, because if you pick the wrong market, I don't care how well you do. It's really tough throughout the year. It's going to be really hard to get people in the door or whatever if you have too much competition or it's not enough people traveling throughout the year or whatever. So know that going into it. Number 2 is going to be picking the wrong property. This happens all the time as well. And when I mean picking the wrong property, I don't mean condos versus single family versus multifamily, right? Own any of those and be successful. We actually own just about every type of property there is as well in our portfolio. Getting at is the elements of that property, right? So does it have desirability? Is the architecture good? What amenities does the property have, or even the neighborhood that you're buying into for that property? All of those different ingredients. A great way to filter that question is, if you're buying the right property, is would you want to stay there? Would you actually want to go there with your, husband or wife, your family, your friends or whatever, and actually spend the night or two or even a week? That is a great filter to use because, if you're only wanting to stay at certain types of properties and you wouldn't actually want to stay at the one that you're going to rent, most people probably wouldn't either. And I'm not saying that you still can't be successful if it's not up to your caliber, but it is a good filter to use, because even if you're buying an existing property that doesn't necessarily give you the desire to want to stay there, what can you do to that property to then make it awesome? When I say type of property, does it have a good backyard? Does the property have a view? Does it feel cozy when you come in there? Does the architecture feel good? Does it have a nice floor plan? Is it in a good neighborhood, right? These are all the factors that roll into it. And part of that is also going to be finding a good agent to work with to help you find a good property in a good neighborhood. Because if you make that mistake, it's really buyer beware on the back end, right? You're going to be stuck with this property and you're not going to want to sell something you just bought either. And you don't want to wake up and find out that it wasn't a good property. I made a whole nother video about how to pick a right agent. Please watch that, or seek that information out if you don't have a good agent already. But that is number 2. Number 3 is zoning regulations and HOAs. I cannot tell you how many people I have in my own network, family, friends, or whatever. They'll come to me and they'll be like, Rory, we bought this property and we found out later there were zoning regulations, or we needed a permit, or we're not allowed to list it as a nightly rental. We can only do a 30-day stay, or God forbid, a 6-month minimum on the rent, or there's an HOA that makes you register, or there's some kind of cap in the neighborhood or that city that has so many short-term rentals they can have. It's everywhere now, and the problem is it keeps changing. I always tell people, don't go into a market that has not been voted on yet. So at the end of the day, the historical markets, like the beach markets that have been renting since the 60s and 70s, they're not going to outlaw nightly rentals or weekly rentals. Their economy thrives on that historically, right? There are a lot of cities around the US right now, as an example, like Dallas just started regulating. That was unheard of, especially in a state like Texas. They were kind of a latecomer to the party, but where I'm in the Southeast, so places like Charleston and Asheville and Savannah, only allowed in certain circumstances, or they're permitted, or they're not allowed at all unless you're in a certain district. You need to know those laws going into it. Do not depend on your agent to go through all this with you. Some of them don't own or know enough about short-term rentals in general and the regulations. So, it is buyer beware. I want you to learn yourself. If you're going into that market, you don't know it, call the zoning office, right? If you're buying a property that has an HOA, you don't want to find out after you closed that it has restrictions as well. So read the covenants and restrictions for that HOA. If there's one on the property, don't depend on your agent or the seller to say, oh yeah, it's good, whatever. There are places, as an example, like in Savannah, it might be legal for the property to operate as a short-term rental, but guess what? That goes with the owner. So when you buy it, you have to get back in line on a waiting list to get your permit. So that stuff can also happen. You really have to understand the rules around what you're buying, where you're buying it, and stuff like that. You do not want to close on, let's say, a $1 million property and find out, oh gosh, I can only do 6-month or 12-month rental, or I got to wait 3 years to get a permit and all this crazy stuff. And don't think you're going to buck the system. The last thing you want is the city or an HOA coming after you and finding you on a daily basis to do what you're doing. So that's mistake number 3. And number 4 is treat it like a business. I see people all the time buying the second home that they want for the family, family. They just want to be able to vacation there in the summer or the whatever throughout the year, and they just want something that's going to pay for itself. That is great if you're a high income earner and you're not worried about making a lot of cash flow from the property, or if, let's say, the revenue stays strong and you're able to pay your bills all the time. But guess what? If there's another COVID shutdown and maybe the city or the state that you're in says no more short-term rentals, or, travels go way down, right? You want to make sure that you can weather that storm. If you're on a break-even basis because you're buying it as a second vacation home, you're getting benefit from the property, but it could bring you underwater, right? Like if you can't cash flow that thing and you're breaking even, when the seasonality may go down, now you're having to feed that property. And there's no way to scale a portfolio in real estate if you're having to feed your properties, right? So treat it like a business. Make sure you have a good cash cushion at the outset. Don't overpay for a property. Don't bring emotion into the purchase and say, oh God, it's got to be my dream vacation home, so let me buy the $2 million place or whatever that isn't necessarily going to cash flow. It's just what you want. Treat it like a business. Make sure that the expenses are lower than the safe amount of income that you're going to get. Set yourself a bar. What's my cash on cash going to be, right? If it's not 20 or 25%, I'm not going to buy it, right? Make sure that you underwrite it correctly. Rule number 4, I see a lot of mistakes getting made in this, and I hope this video, guys, helps you. Just to rehash it, don't buy in the right market, pick the right property, make sure it's got all the ingredients for success. Number 3 is huge. Zoning regulations and HOA, cannot stress it enough. Nobody wants to read through all that red tape and all that stuff, but you don't want to close and find out later you have issues. And then number 4, again, is treating it like a business. Hope this video helps, guys. See you guys in the next one.